I am Vero, and this is a special episode of Modern Immigrant. Welcome everybody to this special episode of Modern Immigrant. You might be new in this space, so welcome. I want you to know that every Monday we have new episodes, and today we have a special one because we're gonna be talking about the Biden's immigration bill and how it's gonna impact immigrants. I was able to talk to Maggie Riley. Maggie is the legal policy and business operations lead of Boundless Immigration. We were able to talk about what's Boundless Immigration and how can all of you immigrants get access to their services to make the whole immigration process easier. Maggie was able to help us understand the new changes that we're going to be seeing for immigrants with this new presidency. We were able to talk about visas and permits that were actually eliminated in the past or in previous administrations, and what are the things that we're actually expecting to come back, or even new things that are gonna be happening. So we also touch on the issues at the border and what's currently happening with the family separations. So I really encourage you to listen to this episode and share this episode with others if you found it helpful. I hope you enjoy, and I will see you on Monday with our regular episodes. Actually, on Monday, we're gonna have an English episode, and you do not wanna miss it. And remember that you can check out our Instagram at Modern Immigrant if you want to connect with us, and if you want to learn more about Modern Immigrant, you can also check our website, modernimmigrant.net. And please don't forget to subscribe if you're watching us on YouTube or in any of the platforms that you might be listening to this podcast. And again, thank you. Bye. And I am really excited that Maggie is here with us today on a special episode of Modern Immigrant. And Maggie is coming from Boundless Immigration. So Maggie, welcome to Modern Immigrant.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm really thrilled to be here today.
Same. And Maggie, I would love for you to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what's Boundless Immigration and what's your role at the company.
Absolutely. So Boundless is a technology company that empowers families to navigate the immigration system with more confidence, to do it more quickly and more affordably. We have put a lot of time and effort into really studying the immigration system and the problem in the United States. Our data, our research and reports are used frequently by members of Congress, by members of the media as well. We've helped 70,000 people so far apply for their green cards, for citizenship, and to be reunited with their families, which is really exciting for us. And most importantly to me, I think that Boundless provides an avenue of access for folks that just need that little bit of extra help navigating the immigration system. You know, maybe they have a relatively straightforward case, but they don't necessarily have a lot of extra cash on hand to hire a law firm. And so that's where Boundless gives folks a little bit of peace of mind by letting them work on their own forms and documents, but with that added confidence of having an attorney sort of check your homework before you submit your application to the government. So it's been a really great time. I've been with Boundless for 2 years, and I am their legal policy and business operations lead. And so in plain English, that means I'm an immigration attorney, and I sort of keep Boundless up to date on what's happening in the immigration arena. Regulatory changes, forms changes, policy changes. And then I also work as sort of the connection point between our customer success team at the company and the independent immigration attorneys that work with Boundless customers.
Wow, that is amazing. I feel like I wanted to find out about Boundless earlier in my immigration. I think
a lot of people feel that way.
Yeah, there are not that many options, I feel, and I haven't used Boundless immigration services, but I have definitely share the resource with other people, and they have said that it just makes things easier, and you just want someone to be like checking on all of those forms, and it's so much paperwork that, yeah, I feel like if you don't have a law background, you're completely lost with the terms.
Well, they're very important documents and applications, and people want to make sure they're putting their best foot forward. And so, you know, I like to think that we give folks a chance to do that.
I'm sure. That's awesome. And thank you for sharing about what you do. And I'm excited to explore in this episode a little bit on like how there's a lot of expectations with this new presidency in how it's going to change things for immigrants, right? And I guess the first thing I want to ask you is how's this new presidency gonna impact immigrants in the U.S.? In a very, I know it's a very broad question, but yeah, I'm sure you can give us like some information to help us understand a little bit more the impact.
Absolutely. Well, we do expect there to be big changes. We're hopeful that they're going to be positive changes, and we've already started to see some of these things happening. I would say that overall, we can really expect this to be a more welcoming administration and therefore a more welcoming environment for immigrants and their families. Folks who want to come live and work in the United States are more likely, I think, to feel welcome doing so and to feel like they have the opportunity to put in that application, to try to, join their family members, to try for that job they always wanted. And so hopefully I think just the tone and the temperature going forward will be less fearful, less uncertainty, and a little bit more steady footing as we start working our way through, cleaning up some of the policies that were enacted in the last couple of years, which is obviously going to take a lot of time, unfortunately, so that we can set our sights forward on the future and on building the kind of system that we really want to see here in the United States. We have already seen a shift in enforcement priorities right at the beginning. President Biden issued a removal moratorium, which was supposed to pause removals from the United States for at least the first 100 days. Unfortunately, that is hung up in the courts, but, it's something that, they came in immediately and wanted to really sort of put the best foot forward. Another one there that I thought was really great was he did direct ICE enforcement policies to shift. So the previous administration had come in and removed priorities. And what that meant is if there are no priorities, everybody is a priority.
Oh, wow.
So if you're just a regular person, you're not an aggravated felon, you don't have a criminal record, you're not doing anything wrong, you're now just as at risk of being detained by ICE under the previous administration.
I see.
As anybody else. And so that was a really, that made people nervous. And so that enforcement priority has been shifted back. We're really looking at, instead of having kind of everybody needs to be afraid all the time, we're really looking towards a change of, everybody has a right, to live, to be comfortable, to have their day in court, maybe.
Exactly.
So, I think really part of it will be that reduction in fear and a lot of those kind of draconian policies that we really became used to over the last couple of years.
And I think like just the fact, like as an immigrant, when I realized that we were going to have a new president, to me that was already like some sort of fear went away, even though I didn't know actually how things were going to be looking, for me at least, in terms of immigration. And what I'm really surprised is that in just the first 3 months of the year, we already saw those changes that you're talking about. And as immigrants, we have been very excited about what's to come. And we even saw changes in like words that I feel like the way the previous administrations have been referring to immigrants have been aliens. Is that correct? And that seems to be changing. So things that are very little, but to me, that's very powerful too.
Absolutely. Words have meaning. Alien is a word that it's a relic of sort of a bygone era, and we had started to see it fall out of favor. Particularly, immigration attorneys don't generally use it. Immigration advocates don't use it. And so something that seems really symbolic, it really has a lot of meaning. My father actually naturalized and became a U.S. citizen about 10 years ago, and he had never said anything to me about it. But when that was announced that the intention was to remove that word, all of a sudden he said, I hated being called that. Like, it was so dehumanizing.
Yes.
So I think that, those little symbolic gestures, they are very important because they show people have value and that we're here to fight for that.
That's beautiful. Yeah. And I think another thing that I was surprised was on the timing, and I think this is like a big concern for us immigrants, is that okay, we know change is coming, but there were things that were done in previous years, that how can we flip them, right? Like how long is it gonna take for us to actually see those amazing things that you were talking about? How long does it take for policy to actually change and reform?
Yeah, so that can be a tough question to answer, unfortunately. It depends on a few factors. First of all, would be if we're talking about a legislative change. And so that might be something like President Biden's, the big immigration bill that he sent to Congress right when he first took office, the U.S. Citizenship Act of 2021. So a legislative act, those can take anywhere from a couple of weeks. Every once in a while, we get lucky and we see Congress act really quickly, maybe after the first coronavirus. CARES Act went through. By and large, though, a bill is drafted, it is sent into committee, it is marked up and amended in committee, and then can be voted out onto the floor or not. And then from there, we know that once a bill gets onto the House floor or the Senate floor, the gloves are off, and that's when, folks are fighting it out for their preferred amendments, hopefully working across the aisle in some bipartisan fashion before they finally bring it to a vote. And then, of course, it would have to go to the other house and then to the president. So the timing there can really vary from, maybe a month to 2 months up to, a full legislative session. Bills can die in committee. Unfortunately, we've seen happen with, the original DREAM Act that was introduced in 2013 didn't make it. Unfortunately, we've seen a lot of these bills sort of come back to life and then sort of recede again. And so it is a bit tricky to answer. I would say that in terms of legislation, there is very broad public support from the American population for comprehensive immigration reform, for whatever that's worth, for our representatives and senators. The people do want to see it. I know that this is a big priority for President Biden, just from everything I've read. I'm really hopeful that we could see something happen this year, but of course, hard to say. Regulatory changes, kind of the same deal. That's an agency rule. So some folks may have heard about the public charge rule. And that was the rule that came out that was going to make it more difficult for folks to get green cards if there was a chance they might need public benefits at some time in the future. So that was a regulatory change. That means that the agency writes the rule, they submit it to the public gets to comment on the rule, and then the agency is supposed to consider that commentary when they implement the final rule. Again, these can go anywhere from a couple of weeks in the case of an interim final rule or an emergency rule, up through several years. The public charge rule was in the work for several years before we finally were forced to deal with it, and thankfully now it's out. Want to move on.
Yes, we don't want that again. Yeah.
No, certainly not.
It's complicated. There's definitely a lot of factors that we don't see happening. We just know, we get the news, and sometimes we're like, why is it taking so long for something to happen? And then you see in a month, I think it was last month, there were so many positive news around immigration that it's kind of like, see, this is what it takes, just someone to kind of change things. And I guess a question that in a way you have already answered, but in like very, I don't know, in a large way, how do you see the Biden administration being different from the Trump administration?
Well, I do think, like I said, it's a more welcoming, sort of hopeful feeling, I think, overall. I do think that, the Trump policies or the policies of the previous administration were by and large very punitive. They were very draconian. So folks who made a mistake in their immigration documentation or, sometimes what an immigration attorney would consider a minor mistake could have very serious implications for someone's ability to continue working legally or to get a green card in the future and so on. And so a reversal of some of these really restrictive policies that were put in place, we're really looking forward to. Another thing that was an interesting and sort of unpleasant experiment during the previous administration was what a lot of attorneys were calling midnight regulations. And that was the practice of the administration issuing proclamations, memos, executive orders late at night on Friday night after all of the offices were shut down, after the media had put the lid on for the week. And so at 5 p.m. on the West Coast, a story would break that they'd released this huge new policy that was going to go into effect in a couple of weeks.
That's insane.
Yeah, and it just really threw a wrench into the works for a lot of people, to put it mildly. So,
yes.
We're hoping that we're not going to see as much of that sort of thing going forward. Sort of a bit more certainty a bit more of a return to just, I don't want to say the way business was done, but the
Mm.
sort of processes and regulations that were put in place, the guardrails to keep the system working the way it's supposed to, which is fairly and efficiently. That's really what I'm hoping to see. Time will tell, of course.
So that means we're hopefully not gonna get like a terrible tweet or a news at, I don't know, 2 a.m. and everything gonna
Yes.
change. Is like, and that brings a lot of, like, just hearing you saying that, it really brings like some mental peace, like knowing that there's a little more security in like how are things gonna be decided, or at least fairly in a way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I would add too that it's a little sort of boring sounding, probably for a lot of people. But one thing that I think will be a huge positive impact on the system overall is that USCIS and to a large extent the Department of State, which handles visas coming into the United States from outside, have been under a hiring freeze for the majority of the last 4 years. And in the Department of State particularly, they lost huge numbers of staff, just tons and tons of people.
Mm-hmm.
And so one of the things that we're really looking for, and one of the things that was mentioned in the Biden immigration bill and in other bills, is increased funding to restaff the asylum offices, hire more immigration judges, potentially restaff consular services.
Mm.
All of these people being hired, again, that's more jobs when we're in the middle of a pandemic. And it means clearing out backlogs, reuniting families that have been stuck outside the country during travel bans, during the pandemic, getting the processes moving again so that people can actually get the benefits they're applying for.
And
So,
just timing, like I was gonna ask you about timing, because like at least in my experience, I have been on a pending status for a long time with a green card process, and we did it with a lawyer and they're helping us, and it's just, it takes time, right? So
really
I'm just like wondering, like, if for what it sounds like you're saying is that things are gonna start getting moving a little faster, and hopefully people that are like me waiting for a visa, things hopefully will get better.
Yeah, that is the hope. And anecdotally, I feel that we are beginning to see signs of the tide turning. We're starting to see things process more quickly. So, like I said, it'll probably continue to take more time to sort of realistically to undo a lot of the damage that was done. But honestly, I'm feeling very optimistic.
That is so amazing. And this is kind of like a, I don't know, this question maybe is very obvious, but if somebody would start like a immigration kind of process today, they submit their papers, they submit all their forms, are there like their papers are gonna take longer, or they go to like, I don't know, like if you compare with people that have been waiting for a long time that did it in a previous administration, because you're doing it in a new one, would that be helpful, or just you just kind of need to wait until it's your turn? I don't know if I'm making sense.
Yeah, the agencies generally follow what is sort of you join the queue essentially. So folks who filed earlier will usually be processed more quickly. So to your question though, the change in administration I do think is going to help processing times in the medium to long run, because they're going to be staffing up to clear the people who've already been waiting. And so that will sort of shorten the times for the people who are just getting in line now, so to speak. Another benefit I think that we will also see is that the Biden administration has directed the agencies to take a look at what processes can they streamline and change now to reduce backlogs. So, for example, prior to 2017, individuals who were getting their green cards through an employment-based visa did not have to attend a removal of conditions interview. That was never a requirement except in particular cases. And in about 2017, the administration made it mandatory for all employment-based green card removal of conditions folks to attend interviews. So suddenly this is a huge number of extra interviews that get put onto the wait list at individual USCIS offices. So for example, policies like that could be rescinded. Certain things that were put in place to slow the process could be removed. And those sort of steps I think will also incrementally speed up the wait times for folks like yourself.
Definitely. Hopefully.
Finally, right?
Yes. I mean, it does have a big impact, and I'm glad that I'm hearing this. All this positive stuff is exciting. Any other anything else that we should expect to change? And I guess in this part, I want to ask you if you think there's any permits or visas or kind of like what you were sharing right now that will come back that was a thing in the past. I know there were some visas like the exchange ones like J1, and I'm getting a little too like specific because I did use the J1 at some point, and I heard that in previous administration that got like eliminated. Are we expecting to see some changes in things to come back in terms of visas?
I do think so. A lot of things during the previous administration weren't, there were several visa categories and sort of statuses that weren't eliminated, but they became so difficult to get that it felt like they were. So
Right.
asylum is one of those. Refugee admissions were slashed to just a fraction. And then there was a travel ban for H-1B visa holders, L visas, and then certain types of J-1 visas, like you mentioned. And that was very challenging for a lot of folks, for many reasons, of course. Fortunately, actually, yesterday was March 31st, was the expiration of those entry
Of the
restrictions.
travel ban. That's right.
Yes,
Okay.
yes. And so we are expecting to see those particular visas be able to be issued and for those folks to be able to enter the country again. We're also really hoping and expecting to see a relaxation of the restrictions that were put in place around some of these other visa statuses. So H-1Bs became much more difficult for employers to get their employees into the country because a lot of new sort of unwritten rules were added into the process. And so we're hoping to see a lot of those things be resolved so that folks are able to get their visas, get their employees, get their students, get people back into their programs again.
Right.
Same for asylum. We've already seen President Biden make a lot of moves in revoking regulations that were put in place to restrict asylum, ending the migrant protection protocols, which was the Remain in Mexico policy, which has been extremely problematic and cruel, honestly. And as well as implementing things like the No Ban Act, which would prevent future presidents from implementing future travel bans. And that's part of President Biden's proposed immigration bill.
Wow, that is
So
huge.
we are hoping to see some things open up a bit more. And we are potentially looking at some new statuses that may come through as part of President Biden's immigration bill that he's proposed as well.
Oh wow, that's exciting. That's really really good. And I have this question that I didn't necessarily add in the outline, so it's okay if there's not any specific answer at the moment. But I want to ask you about the family separations and all of the situation that's been going on in the border. I have heard like a lot of different opinions in terms of how the current administration is handling the issue. So I don't know, is that going to change? Is it getting worse as it was last year?
Yeah. So the border situation and migrant surges, as the media likes to call them at the border, are something that have been going on since time immemorial. People move for work, people move with the seasons. They tend to be cyclical. And many migration experts would say that it's not so much a surge that's ever driven by a policy enacted by any government. One member of the American Immigration Lawyers Association referred it to telling people not to flee violence in their country is like telling someone to stay inside a burning house. They're not going to do it.
It's an emergency, exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
And so while we are seeing increases in numbers at the border currently, I would caution that that is part of a broader trend that we've been seeing happening cyclically for the last several decades. Unfortunately, the current administration did inherit some very serious problems at the border. The zero tolerance policy, which took place in 2018, which forcibly separated children from their parents and then forcibly processed them as unaccompanied minors. That created a lot of problems. Quite a few of those children still have not been reunited. And so the current administration, of course, is in a very unfortunate position in terms of trying to fix some of those
Yeah.
problems. I think in terms of the number of children currently at the border and the issues of shelters, obviously having children in any kind of detention is not something that I find acceptable, and I think that the majority of immigration advocates are not going to find acceptable. There are very, very few situations, if any, in which detention is really an appropriate response,
Mm.
especially in a humanitarian immigration context. So while I recognize the difficult situation in which the Biden administration finds itself, I do think that they should really look to immigration advocates,
Mm.
folks who are on the ground fighting the fight, consult with immigration attorneys who are working with immigrant communities, and get creative on solutions that don't involve putting children in detention centers, that don't involve quickly deporting whole family
Mm.
units, to avoid having children in detention centers, and instead recognize that these people are here for a reason. They want to be a part of our society.
Mm.
They want to contribute. They want to live safe and free. And there's no good reason not to let them do that.
Yeah, 100%. Thank you. That really clarifies the concern, and yeah, it's just a difficult situation for sure, and hopefully we get to see them to be reunited and together. I think that's the main goal.
I mean, I know my own personal opinion would be to see nobody in immigration detention everywhere, anywhere. I am very proud of Washington State. We actually just yesterday passed legislation to ban for-profit prisons, which includes the Northwest Detention Center, which is our ICE detention facility here. And so that's very exciting.
That's huge. Thank you for sharing that information. I didn't know that. That's huge.
Yeah. The
Mm.
Biden administration is very keen to phase out private prisons in the criminal context and in the immigration
Mm.
context. So hopefully they'll keep pushing forward on that and look for alternatives to detention that are more safe and more humane.
Yeah, yeah. Wow. Maggie, is there anything else that you would like to share to any of the immigrants that are listening right now that might have felt really scary in the past and unwelcome, and that might still feel like that? There's some trauma for sure that we still carry. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
So I think the first thing I would say is that, there is positive legislation out there that's being debated in good faith. There is some political will, which is really exciting to see after a long time of many folks feeling like political footballs. And so hopefully we'll get to a point where, we're really going to be treating people like people. Um, One thing that I really would like to stress is that the clear majority of Americans support positive, comprehensive immigration reform. 60% of Americans support the 8-year path to citizenship that was proposed by President Biden, and 72% of Americans support citizenship for dreamers. Majorities also support these funding programs I talked about for asylum backlogs, for refugee processing, for providing funding for
Mm.
judges. And so I would really encourage you that when and if and when you hear hurtful, divisive rhetoric, remember that that's the minority voice. Most Americans want you here. Most Americans know that you are contributing and that you are important and a benefit and an important piece of our society. And we're happy that you're here. We've seen good progress in these first few months, and we're going to have to undo some damage so that looking forward, we can really, see the progress and fight for the progress that we want to see.
Mm.
But it is going to keep being, a bit of a road. And so take care of yourselves, take care of your families and your communities, because we're all stronger together.
That is so beautiful. And that data that you share gave me so much hopes. Like I didn't know that was really the majority of the
Yeah.
country feels that they want us to be here. And I think that changes the way we enter a situation too in a room. So thank you so much for that message. Thank you for clarifying so many difficult terms in a way that we can all understand. And I would love to get a way to connect either with you or with Boundless Immigration. Where can people find the services? And is it okay if they're in different states in the country?
Yeah. Boundless can help folks located anywhere in the United States or the world, so your location is not a problem. We are a totally digital process, and the idea is really to help people do this as easily as possible. You can get more information and resource guides, how-to articles at boundless.com. And then we also have quite a big social media presence. So you can find us on Twitter at Choose Boundless or Instagram at Boundless Immigration. And then, yeah, we hope that we get the chance to get to know you and welcome you to our country.
Yeah, how awesome. Thank you. And that's how I connected with Boundless, was through Instagram. They're so active in that. And I love getting a lot of great information and data from the Instagram account. That's at least what I use for Modern Immigrants. So it's been a great resource to share, like, information that's true, because there's a lot of the other kind of information right now. So again,
absolutely.
Right, we need to be careful in knowing the sources right now. Maggie, thank you so much for the time to spend here with us, and yeah, wish you have a great afternoon.
Thank you. It's been an honor, and have a lovely day.
Bye.